Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this evening, and welcome to our second annual virtual film festival, co-hosted by the Listening Point Foundation and the Sigurd Olson Environmental Institute at Northland College. We are so grateful that you all have decided to join us here this evening. My name is Steffi O'Brien. I am the Executive Director of the Listening Point Foundation. And here with me is Alan Brew, Director of the Sigurd Olson Environmental Institute, Freya Finkel, the Program Coordinator for Listening Point Foundation, will be in the background moderating our discussion this evening. And see if we can get Diana back here. Alan will be moderating our discussion this evening. So if you have any questions, please feel free to submit them. All of your questions are welcome. At the bottom of your screen, you'll notice there is a Q&A button. Please feel free to click that and enter your question or put it into the chat and we will work it into the discussion. This presentation or this evening's discussion will be recorded so that we can share it with everyone after on the Listening Point Foundation website. It will be available sometime later this month. And we believe that the discussion will probably run about an hour. We'll see where we are when we get to that point. So thank you so much again. We're really glad that you've joined us for this special evening, and I'm going to turn it over to Alan to get things started.
Super. Thank you, Steffi, and welcome to all of you who have joined us this evening. I'm so pleased that you can be with us, and I'm especially excited to welcome Diana this evening. I first got to know Diana because in 2019, she won the Sigurd Olson Nature Writing Award for her autobiographical book, To Speak for the Trees. And after winning that award, Diana and I had an opportunity to talk and correspond a little bit. Unfortunately, as all of you know, the awards are announced the following year. So we announced the award in the spring of 2020. And you all know what was just getting underway in the spring of 2020. And so unfortunately, we haven't had an opportunity to bring Diana to campus here at Northland and the Sigurd Olson Environmental Institute. And so I'm especially excited that we've been able to have her join us this evening to talk about the film that she was part of and all of the other really exciting work that she is doing. Just a couple of words of introduction. Diana is one of those rare and special people who is as steeped in indigenous ways of knowing the world as she is in Western scientific ones. And much of her life's work has been bringing those two ways of knowing the world together in really important and powerful ways. And it continues very much to be the focus of her work. I encourage you, and then she's also a writer. As you know, she won the Nature Writing Award, and she's written a number of other books. And my understanding, Diana, is that you still do that by pencil on
right.
paper, which is wonderful. But you've also developed apps, and so I think we'll end up talking about that over the course of the evening. But Diana has developed a Plant a Tree app that helps to support her current kind of main initiative, I believe, which is the bioplan, and I'm sure she'll say much more about that this evening. I do encourage you, maybe after the presentation this evening, to take a peek at Diana's website. She does have a website that explains much of the work that she's done. There's some neat videos there of interviews that she's done, as well as information about her books and the app and the bioplan and those sorts of things. And then also, some of you may have seen, Diana was also recently featured in a New York Times article just a week or so ago on February 24th. And so it's another neat insight into some of the work that Diana is doing here. And then, of course, I hope you've all had a chance to view the film that sort of is the impetus for her joining us tonight, The Call of the Forest, which she did with Jeffrey McKay. And if not, I'm sure after hearing Diana talk tonight, you will be inspired to circle back and to view that film, which would be wonderful. As Steffi said, I'll be doing my best to bring your questions forward to Diana. Sometimes I do combine questions if they're similar or related. And so you might not hear your question exactly how you posed it, but I'll do my best to get the gist of the question to Diana over the course of the evening. And so, Diana, I think we'll jump right in. I've got a really neat one to get us started with. Sigurd Olson, of course, was a huge advocate for wilderness. It was really at the core of the work that he did. And so this first question is related to that. And so, Diana, one of our participants this evening is asking the question, in the wilderness, in the United States, in wilderness areas with sort of a capital W, they don't engage in restoration by definition. And so it's a hands-off attitude. And the question is that the way it should be? Or should we be planting trees or working with invasive species, restoring native species perhaps in our set-aside areas, these wilderness areas that we've set aside?
Well, the big problem with wilderness, if you want to look at it that way, is that it's always changing. That's the thing about nature, it's in constant change. And unfortunately, for the last 200 years that we have been able to write, nobody has written the pattern language of ancient wilderness. We don't really know, and we're busily getting rid of the last ancient forests that are left in the world. So they also hold indigenous fungi, they hold unusual lichens, they hold unusual medicines, and we have to battle to maintain what we have. Now, with regards to replanting, America, the United States of America, was once upon a time a great savanna. The Aboriginal people maintained that savanna for actually deer hunting. And what they did is they too changed the habitat of the whole continent, and they flash fired in April and in November to very fast fires across the land. And that produced potassium hydroxide, which is ashes. And the ashes, the potassium of the ashes is actually a feeder for all the nut trees. And the nut trees and the oak trees of the land were eaten, and they were produced in enormous amounts, and they were necessary to feed the Aboriginal people here. So who knows really, truly, what North America was once upon a time, let's say maybe, a couple of millennia, 3 millennia ago. That goes for all over the world. Really all over the world. In one part of Canada that I have helped in saving is Pimachuanaki, which is the central part of Canada, and it's the size of Denmark. And the forest there is 5,000 years old. Now you go into that forest with me and you would find a whole different kettle of fish to anything you would find in America, into the United States of America. I mean, I have not seen what I would consider to be ancient forests in America. And there are fingerprints for that. The thumbprints are, you look at the fern population, you look at the Isoetes population, you look at the lichen population, you look at what's on the trees, despite the size of the trees itself. The eye of a botanist can tell you a lot of things. So that I think is pretty well all I have to say on the subject. I mean, I could say more, but the other people have questions.
Sure. So a somewhat related question is about the California redwoods. Reforestation, is there reforestation happening there, or are you aware of efforts of restoration for the California redwoods in particular?
Well, now I have to tell you about something I've done. I have been part of a group that was supported by a very wealthy woman, and I did the Bible for the restoration of the whole global forest. I wrote that Bible, and it's the master plan for redoing all of the forests, including California. California is very important for many, many reasons, as a matter of fact. And it is cloning the forest and keeping it in super cold temperatures to keep the forest, the clone material of the forest at -40 to maintain it against things that are happening like today as we're speaking. So I have 30 of those species cloned, and that Bible that I wrote was so important that it was transported across the world by private jet and by hand to hand, as a matter of fact. So I have cloned specific species within the California forest, and they are species that I have judged to be correct to withstand climate change. They have unique features, botanical, physiological features. I have already done that. Now the task is to get them into the soil. And the problem is that in California, when we were trying to plant trees in California, we could not get the shovel into the ground. It was so dry. So you couldn't expect any seedlings to grow. It was so dry. And the redwoods in California, what they do is they act as vast convector currents for the fresh water that rises off the Pacific Ocean. And it doesn't have salt in it. It is really double distilled water, if you look at it that way. And that in turn looks after the sexual reproduction of the trees. That has gone from 9 hours per day down to 2 hours. We need all of you out there planting trees. And this book I'm just finishing, Anima Mundi, the soul of the world, I am hoping to be able to enable that to happen.
One of the questions I have is, you emphasize the importance of planting native species and
Yes.
reforesting with native species.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be a native species as we experience climate change? And as the climates of a particular geographical region change, how does native to that space work?
Okay. All right. Okay. That's a very important question. So everybody listen very closely to this one. The most northern species, we're talking about climate change here now, planting for to stop climate change in the bioplan. The most northern species can go south, but the southern species of any tree species cannot go north because of the circadian rhythm disruption in the tree. They are not hardy enough to withstand climate change. So in my garden, what I am trying to breed and what I have managed to get is all of the species on the north, super edge of the north, that nobody has been trying to do. And I'm trying to propagate them so that the propagation aspects of that, one of them is the chestnut, the American chestnut, as a matter of fact, will go back and can go down into any part of the USA. And they become epicenter forest. They become genetically superior epicenter forest that can actually guard all the species around.
And that's true around the globe. So the northern species
globe.
all
Yes.
go down.
Yes.
Interesting.
And then if you look at the southern part of the world, of course, then you're thinking in reverse. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean,
Oh,
yeah,
yes. Yeah.
All
What
right.
about folks living in the middle? Would you recommend that they plant currently native species there, or does?
Yeah.
Or yeah.
What I would recommend for the people in the center, in the tropics and the semi-tropics, you really have to think. This is thinking in terms of altitude. The higher altitudes, of course, you can take pines in there, and the same in Australia. You can do that. But in lower altitudes, you look to the evergreens. What the evergreens do is act as a net phenomenon, and the net phenomenon, because of osmotic pressure in the plants and because of the condensation aspect of the air is very humid in there. You get condensation naturally down to the roots because it is a mineral soil in these areas, and that is the continual feeding of the roots. And you have so many aerosols, and so much is on the trunk itself, and there's so many species on the trunk, as a matter of fact, then you have a feeding. You have a feeding into the soil in a circle.
Interesting. So a follow-up question from one of our participants is, does the principle that you just described apply to the understory as well then, the vegetative understory of these forests?
Well, excuse me. See how much beer I have to drink. In the understories, well, in a sense, the understories can be taken care of by the bird population. Because the understories, the birds are the patrol system for the forest. And in the patrol system, they transfer pollen, they transfer all of the fruits of the trees from the upper canopy down to the lower canopy. And in the lower canopy, what you have is you have a feeding by animals, mammals, birds, and into the ground cover. So in some senses, you can put in some singular species that are subspecies into that area. And Akira Miyawaki, who died in July, he was doing that. And he did that very successfully. He's in the film. But Akira actually died, unfortunately. And he was in the process of replanting some of the Amazon. And I have spoken to him in depth about what he's doing, and he knew in depth what I was doing. And so far as I know, we're the only two people that I know in the world who are doing this. It's gone. I can't hear. Am I supposed to hear him?
Sorry.
Oh,
Forgot to
okay.
unmute myself. That was my fault. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
Let me start over. You note that in old growth forests, the lichen and fungi, ferns are much different
Yes.
than they are in younger forests. How long does it take about for those lichen and fungus communities to start establishing themselves in a regrowing forest? So what kind of time periods are we working with as you reestablish these older forests? For fungi, we're talking 100 years. Okay, wow.
It takes approximately 100 years for the different fungi to start growing. Oh, sorry. I'm talking about lichens here. The lichens on the surface of the trees takes 100 years.
Okay.
The lichens on the surface of stones take about 100 years. Some of the lichens take longer than that. Then the fungi, some of the fungi we're talking about, will only infiltrate ancient forests. And this is what's happening in Fairy Creek right now in Canada. Out on the west coast, what is happening is that the last of the ancient Thuya plicata, the western cedars, are being taken down for toilet paper. And they are ancient forests. And inside in those, there are endogenous fungi, which is something which is also equally important. The endogenous fungi have an antiviral component, an ability to maybe stop COVID-19 in its tracks. But we're taking all those species down. And in Oregon, I understand they wanted to do clinical studies on it. And the coast between Canada and the US, they're taking them down in Canada, and the US wants them to do research. So it's an absolute blow your mind, stupid, I'll use the word stupid again, situation, because we need everything.
Yeah, so much. In terms of that preservation, so you had mentioned in the film communities, the questioner is wondering, are there other communities like those in Eastern Manitoba and Western Ontario that have applied to be UNESCO heritage sites or are already UNESCO sites? Are you aware of other either applications or established sites?
Well, no, that is, I'm sorry, I can't really answer that question because I don't know. I'm a scientist. I'm doing things that are like, for instance, Fairy Creek. I'm just giving you an example. What I'm busy doing right now, and I have done, is I've written a huge paper on the importance of ancient forests, and it's published by Springer Verlag in Switzerland, and between Switzerland and Italy and Georgia and Canada. That paper is the first paper to go into the hands of the judge, and the judge can make her judgment about whether these trees get taken down or not. the first time in the history of science, she's got papers to say to her, they don't come down. That's what I'm doing. I'm broadsiding the whole system.
Yeah.
So I'm not a very nice person.
Oh, I don't believe that.
I am trying very hard to find sneaky ways around systems. So with regards to, you can have to look it up on the internet, who is looking for UNESCO sites, and they are there. There's so many of them. I know for a fact that in Japan there are a lot of them. The food is in a, you know, in a different form in Japan. So I don't know. I'm just only me. That's all.
Yeah. So speaking of you and what kind of a person you are, one of the other questions relates to you being featured in the Overstory, or a character being modeled on you in the Overstory. And this participant's wondering what you think about that character and how well it does or doesn't represent you in your work.
Well, I think that Richard, that's Richard Powers you're talking about. Yes. I think that Richard could have actually picked up the phone and phoned my publishing house in New York and asked Paul Slovak, who would be my publisher, to phone me, because he got part of me right. But I would like for him to have got a better angle on my research, because the research I've done is actually far more interesting than what he has portrayed. And so his clue in that was to call me Patricia, which is the mock name for an Irish woman, or Paddy for a man, and Westerford is Beresford. So what happened about that is, about 6 months before Richard published his book, one of the agents in New York thought it was terribly funny, and they sent me the copy, and then Richard was told that I was sent the copy. And what I think he did is he went through my books and used the stuff out of my books. But by gosh, Richard, come on now. I would have talked to you, for God's sake. So I talked to him afterwards. You know, I mean, it's hopeless. So it's you know, it's a book that's everybody really has enjoyed, and that's good. That's all good.
Yeah. Oh, neat. I'm going to circle us back to one of your earlier comments. One of the participants asked about the movement of tree species north after the receding of glaciers in relationship to the north-south movement principle that you were talking about. I wonder if you could just respond to that.
Yeah, well, I can respond to it with one particular species that I actually found. I have a bucket list. I have one more species on my bucket list. I have a bucket list, and it is called the Wafer Ash, that I was very interested in. And I can tell you that actually sat behind the black box effect of the ice receding all up the continent, the North American continent. And the species that I was am so very interested in is the Wafer Ash, is Petilia trifoliata chrysalidifolia is the name of it. And it is a member of the Rutaceae family. And the Rutaceae family is the grapefruit, the lemon, the orange family. And indeed, we have that family growing in Canada and in the US. Well, once upon a time, I think about 2,000 years ago, that species lived all up the continent from Florida up into zone 4 in Canada, zone 3-4 in Canada. So it migrated and migrated. And what happened is, when the settlers came into Canada, they cut it all down. Because I checked with the medicine men, all of the ancient medicine men across, when I addressed the Assembly of First Nations. So that was gone. So that was the secretary of the First Nations. It had their important medicine. It was a medicine that synergized all other medicines. And they used that in the bags that they used off their waist. And that was a very important medicine to the Aboriginal people. So I had a lookout for them for about 20 odd years, believe it or not. And finally, by accident, I happened to be down in Texas. And in Texas, I asked a very wealthy woman if she owned 6 ranches I said, do you have Petilia trifoliata crucidifolia? She set her manager on it. She had a huge herbarium set up from the University of Boston, and by God, we found it. So I was hung out of a helicopter for 4 days, and I gridded the whole of over 200 acres with a pair of binoculars, a pair of oceanic binoculars, and I found the damn tree. So that tree is being propagated. Now, I can tell you, it wasn't north, but idiots, yeah, our ancestors, idiots, cut it down. So now that is going back up the continent again. So that's kind of one answer. There are trees and species that I'm very interested in. I want to repatriate back into the United States. You need to have some species back into the United States. One of them is the oak that you have to have. It's the blue oak, and it's called Quercus douglasii, which is going on the endangered list. And Quercus douglasii was the basic food for the Ohlone people that lived around California, that lived around San Francisco, and they had the greatest linguistic ability of all of the Aboriginal people in all of North America.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, so you shouldn't have asked me.
Oh, no, I'm glad we did. I'm going to ask this question on Saturday night too, when we have our fire folks here, but I'm going to give you a crack at it first. So this next question is, one of our participants is asking, should we continue to remove balsam from boreal forests in northeastern Minnesota and Wisconsin, northwestern Wisconsin, because of how flammable they are and the risk that they pose to other species of kind of catastrophic fire?
Absolutely not. The word is no. And I'll tell you what comes out of balsam. The aerosols from balsam, from the spring of balsam, are compounds that go into the atmosphere, and they are compounds that scrub the atmosphere clean. Prostaglandins, if you want to spell them out, prostaglandins and prostacyclins are actually, there are many prostacyclins. They are bullet-like materials that go into the atmosphere. They are aerosols. They maintain cleanliness in the atmosphere, and they actually act as a sterilizing aspect in the atmosphere. Have you ever thought of why you're breathing in air and the air does not affect your lungs? That's why the balsam, the Populus balsamifera candicans is one of the species of the north, and it is called by the Aboriginal Cree of the North the medicine stick. It is one of their most important medicines in the north of the country. Now you're talking about fires. That's a disgrace, because what you really have done is you've introduced eucalyptus species and talk about flash fires. They flash fire with a low flash point of 47 degrees. And in California this year, the air temperature went up to 50. So they flash fired. Somebody carelessly on a motorbike or in a car threw out a cigarette butt. That's enough to burn down the whole nation.
Wow. Yeah.
So do talk to me about fires. Yes, I do not like to see them. I do not like to see people being hurt, their families, but it was a stupid thing. And in Ireland, of course, they did the same thing, you know. In Ireland, we have lots of eucalyptus planted in some of the great houses. My family estate has got, I don't own it. I'm not even pretending I own it. The family estate, I inherited nothing because I'm a woman. Women with ovaries do not inherit anything. So, but they have eucalyptus there. But in Ireland, God help us, it's always raining. I mean, there's no hope of any flash fire. Like in Ireland, I mean, you'd want to be crying to start a fire. So right. America is different.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
One of the things you advocate for, of course, as we talked about already, is planting native species. And one of our participants is looking for some guidance. How do we do that when primarily our access to to plants is through big box stores and nurseries and other places that are often selling species that are not native to our areas. And perhaps this speaks to your app and to some of the other resources that you've developed.
Yeah. They're all pretty well non-native in the big box stores. And besides, you shouldn't be shopping in the big box stores anyway. You should be going to local people. And there are lots and lots of small organic growers around you, more probably than you realize, and they are starting to grow trees. Now, okay, let's start off on number one. You have over 500 species of oak in the United States of America. It is you have the most oak that any part of that any continent in the globe that's of any continent on the globe. So, okay, let's think about oak. In the oak, you have, as you go down to the equator, you have huge oak. The acorns are the size of an egg. They're huge. And that was once upon a time the balanistic culture of the West Coast. They ate oak. They ate the acorns of oak. They made a flour out of it. They made a bannock out of it, and they survived on it. And they do that in Korea right now. So start with the oak. Go out and look at an oak tree. Get the oak when it's ripe. When the oak is ripe, when it's kind of a brown color. So you take the oak on the ground, you put it into a jar of water, and if it floats, discard it. If the oak drops to the bottom, then that's the one you plant. You take that oak, you find a place, you put it on its belly, 2 inches below in the ground, soil above it, mark the spot, because you think you have a good memory and you don't. So mark the spot, protect the spot, and you have planted a blinking tree. So then start irritating people around you saying you want the species on the app. So you'll get them, but you got one in, so then you've got 3 more to go.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to circle you back again. We've got a follow-up question to the balsams. So if the balsams die because of spruce worm, budworm, for instance, should they be removed at that point? No. Once they're dead, you'd leave them?
No. And you know why? Because the populus species are a member of the willow Saliaceae family. The populus can reproduce from the ground. They can clone, go and climb underground, and so can the elm. The American elm can do that too. So you're looking at a landscape and you think there are no trees here. What the heck is coming? But the populus balsamifera and the balsams the populus species will survive. There is a basic knowledge within each species. It's like a knowledge of its own survival within all species, plants, animals, insects, within all species. And the trees have it too. So they will pop up. They will pop up. One will pop up, many will pop up, because you see, they have seen fire before, and they can be burned to the ground and they will come up. Yeah. So you have to be patient.
Okay. Good. Going to take us a little bit different direction. You're a biologist in part, and this individual is wondering, if you are a college student today, so if you were back at the beginning of your studies, what would you study or do to help with progress in forest protection? What should students do today to make a difference?
Yeah, it's funny, I get asked that question an awful lot. I don't really consider myself to be a biologist. Like, I'll tell you what I studied. I studied classical botany, and then of course I did all the physiologies and all of the effects of hormones, but I did medical biochemistry, and I did a comparison between the two, and that's really how my life is swung between the two. So I have a unique niche situation within the world of science, as I am right now. And what is happening to me is I followed those two disciplines, and I did chemistry, organic chemistry, radionuclear chemistry, and a whole pile of other bloody chemistries. So I did a whole pile of studying like that. And when I was studying, everybody would say to me, Diana, why in heaven's name are you doing this? Botany is not related to medical biochemistry, but it actually is. What has happened is, in the last 50, 60, 70 years, And this is what E.O. Wilson used to complain to me about this. E.O. used to say, everybody's looking at counting angels at the top of a pin, but they're not connecting everything together. And it's the ability to be able to connect things. Okay, so I would have probably done more physics. Okay, you're going to get my answers now. I would probably have done a bit more physics. I did a lot of mathematics, but I probably would do more mathematics. You need to have organic chemistry. You have to have it. If you don't have organic chemistry, don't bother going to university. All right, just don't bother going, because there's the connecting line in medical biochemistry. Right there. You need to know something about the functioning of the human body and maybe do some physiology. So what you could do is track in on your botanical systems, okay, because we really need more botanists in the world and the functional botanists who know what they're doing. And we need to apply that into forestry, because that's not applied in forestry. Forestry is 2x4. How many planks can you get out of a tree? That is what they all study in all the universities. We don't want that anymore. We don't need that. We want to replant the whole forest. We want to replant the global forest. So think about it. Study trees. Study your organic chemistry. Study your mathematics so you know how to apply. Have a good idea on the geology of the place and a good idea of the geography of the place. Then study physics. And then when you're finished with it, you look at poetry.
Yes.
In poetry is probably the most essential element to dream. If you cannot dream, you will not have the answers to solutions. Make good note of the poets. And we have a wonderful book of poetry here called Heartwood. It was the beginning of the thinking of the forest by way of poetry. The book of poetry is called Heartwood. Anything like that, read it. Get a boyfriend, go out and strangle in a fellow if you're young and nail him to the ground and read poetry to him. And if the gentleman is looking for a lady, nail her to the ground and read poetry, because you can dream. In science, we're all dusty and crusty and fossilized and everything, but we dream. Every single morning of my life, I read a poem of Pablo Neruda, any one of the poems in Gaelic, in many, many languages. That's what you start with. And then you follow your heart. And when they all tell you, you can't do this and you can't do that, ignore them. Because yours is the future. You have to have the vision for the future. And the vision for the future is not going to come out of a university. I'm sorry, all you professors there dangling and saying she's terrible. It's not. It's going to come out of your heart. It's going to come out of the poetry of your life. And then when you have settled that, then you really study the things that interest you. If you conquer the studies of the things that interest you, then you'll be a dynamite in the world to come.
Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. We've had a little dialogue going on here in the chat that I wanted to bring to your attention, and maybe you can comment on it too. Some of our audience, and I think they might be right, that there may be some confusion about the balsam references. So the two different balsam families, balsam poplar, which I think you've been referring to, many of our audience are probably thinking about Eastern balsam. And I don't know if you're familiar with the two different species or can comment on the differences there.
Yeah.
If you want to say a little bit about that and whether that would have changed your answers to any of the previous questions.
No.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. The poplar you're talking about is if you happen to go in the forest and you get lost, you take the bark off and you eat cambium tissue. It keeps you alive.
Are you? Oh, okay. I just want you're not speaking about the poplar tree now, are you?
I'm talking about the aspen.
The aspen. Okay. What about Eastern balsam though?
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's the same thing.
Okay.
I mean, look, the continent has had fires, and fires have been rejuvenating for it's like saying, we're getting too much sun right now. We're getting too much alpha, beta, and gamma radiation from the sun. Well, we have to stop that by stopping the greenhouse effect, the greenhouse bounce. It's kind of a backwards argument in a way, because the greenhouse effect is causing the heat, is causing the flash fires. The idea is to utilize the photosynthetic reaction, which is the one reaction, or most important reaction on the planet, is to have the ability to buzz out oxygen, sequester carbon down out of the atmosphere, not pay for it, sequester it down into the tree, and then reduce it down into the 300s, and then you're not going to be worried about these terrible fires.
Right.
Like go back behind that argument and think about it that way.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I hope they're not punching one another or anything.
No. Another book reference. So you are prominently mentioned, I suspect you're familiar with this, in the Tree Line as well,
Yep.
by Ben Rawlson. And the participants wondering, do you have thoughts on the book and its importance to the discussion of climate change?
Yeah, I do. Ben came to my house, stayed with me, and he is with good respect to Ben, he's a wonderful writer. He hasn't studied. He speaks what Swahili. He is very educated in that area. He doesn't have science, so he came to me for science, and I went through science, one thing after another, osmotic pressure and suction pressure and so on and so forth, and transpiration, respiration, so on in the plant. The meaning of photosynthesis, photosynthetic reaction, quantum structures, and so on and so forth, for about 4 or 5 days with Ben. My husband fed both of us while these classes were going on from morning till night. And then Ben said to me, look, Di, when I finished my manuscript, can I send it to you for going through all the science in it, which I did do that too, because I'll tell you why. I want to help to save the boreal forest. It is one forest that can't be replanted. And what I think about Ben is one heck of a good person. He has his heart in the right place. He wanted to do this book, and I facilitated him to do this book. And I will do that with anybody who writes about trees, whom I respect, which I respect him. And I think the end product of that book is it's a good read. It's a little bit hard, I think, read for some people, but the juice is in the book.
Super, thank you. I'd like to take us now back to the beginning of the film, that The Call of the Forest, and you begin very early there, focusing on the sense of smell in the forest, which, as you know, we're a very visual dominant species. And so we tend to think about seeing trees, or the forest for the trees, and even in those common expressions. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about knowing a forest or knowing trees by their smell. And then as you go on to talk about, and you touched on this earlier, but if you could say a little bit more about the aerosols, but just what it means to know trees through the sense of smell, rather than some of the other senses that we tend to allow to dominate our interactions with the world.
Well, first of all, I wrote the director's script for the film. I mean, I wrote that. And so I am to blame for the whole bloody thing, really. So now I thought I had published material on aerosols. It would have been in the 80s. And aerosols, I believe, are very, very important, because the body takes in just the amount of tether that it needs. We're talking biochemistry here. And this is where the forests become very important. The alpha and beta pinene that come from most of the northern forests go into your system, and they protect your body. They protect your T-cell ratio, raise your T-cell ratio, and give you a 30-day protection to cancers. Now, going down to the redwoods, the taxodione that is in the redwoods gives the male of population, and if they go and not put anything on their heads, keep their arms open and their legs open, it gives you a protection to prostate cancer. This is something you gentlemen need to know, and it is something that is very important for you, and so on and so forth about the trees. In our lives, in your life, my life, all of our lives, we are used to synthetic smells. And synthetic smells are sometimes actually quite dangerous for the body because they contain compounds that are deleterious, that make a platform of changing the endoplasmic reticulum so that it makes you more prone to cancers. So what I wanted to do in the film, I wanted to increase the concept of smells, of aerosols, and make you aware that if you go into an ancient forest, the smell even of the soil in that kind of ancient forest is different. So like I'll ask you, all of you listening to this, to do this as an experiment for yourselves in the next 3 weeks. Kind of go out for a little trot every day. You don't have to go do a long run. Just go out for a trot and smell the air. Every single day, the air smells differently. And I want you to become aware of those smells. And then when you go on your hiking trips, take it easy. Take the walking slowly. And if you want to smell the air, you straighten up your lungs. And what you do, straighten out your shoulders and you get the breathing into the lower part of your lungs. So you breathe deeply. And then the aerosols go right into the lower part of your lungs. And then you're aware of the smell of trees. Now, if you ladies and gentlemen are like me and cut your own firewood, right? And my husband and I cut our own firewood, except for this year we didn't do it, but every other year we have. You crack open elm and put your nose to the elm, Ulmus americanus, and you can smell cat pee. So they're all the woods, the birch, you open them up and you get that smell that hits you in your teeth. You open up, you crack open, let's see what oak, and you get a strange feeling at the back of your tongue, which is tannins. So that's being aware of nature. And that's what the Aboriginal people talk about when they say nature is the best teacher. Nature is the best teacher.
That's really neat. That's neat. How about a little bit more about Irish I'm not pronouncing it correctly, I think. Brehon law.
Brehon law.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, okay. Now, you know the Magna Carta. All of you folks know the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta is based on precedents. And then there's the Napoleonic Code that happens in France and elsewhere. The Magna Carta is the law of North America, really the law of the United States, and all the judges adhere to the Magna Carta. But funnily enough, there is a law system that was in the ancient Irish cultures 2,000 years ago. And especially these laws were called the Brehon laws. And the Brehon laws follow copyright, to each cow a calf. The Brehon laws allow a man and a woman in February to actually separate from one another, to have a divorce. The Brehon laws allowed equal opportunity of education to both men and women. How about that for a girly trip? Men and women. They were extensive laws, actually, and from the Brehon laws, they were put together. They had been held before the time of Christ, and they were put together in Tara by Dún Laoghaire, the king of Dún Laoghaire, and he put them together in the 300s after Christ. And those were the laws of Ireland. Those were the laws that allowed me to be a ward. They're very, very extensive laws in nature. If you talk badly about somebody, you have to do reparation. They're absolutely extensive laws, and they are being looked at again in Ireland. As a matter of fact, the constitutional lawyers, some of whom are friends of mine, are re-establishing some of these laws. And I would like to see them added on to the Magna Carta, so there is a greater protection for, guess what? Nature. Nature was protected under those laws. You could not cut down the sacred trees on Willa. So there's one advantage. He's gone. He's lost. is muted. Unmute yourself.
I did.
No good. Okay.
Maybe also just a little bit more about the Brian Burrow oak and in its special relationship. You were also telling us some fun stories about accessing that tree and the dangers inherent in that. And our participants might like to hear a little bit about that story too.
Yeah, well, Brian Boru was the king of Munster. The king was a very, very famous character. He was an Ovrian. That is how you say it in the Gaelic language, Brian Ovrian. And he loved hunting. And the legend was that he had an oak forest, and this is the last oak of his oak forest. And on every tree, he could park 1,000 horses on 1,000 men under the canopy of one ancient oak. And that's the Brian Boru that exists right now. It's a colossal tree. It is unbelievably important. And so when we arrived to do the filming, to film this tree, and I wanted specifically that tree because he was an extraordinary man, and he had done all of the prophecies with his prophet called on Easthana. Easthana was his female prophet, and all of these prophecies have come true to this day. And actually even to today, they are true. So anyway, we came with all the cameras and everything, and we saw the oak, and the oak was in this field up on kind of a bridge kind of a little height on the field. And so we climbed over the fence with all the cameras and everything. And oh my God almighty, we saw on one part of the field this huge black Angus, and he had a big ring on his nose. It was a bull. We weren't told that the bull was guarding the tree. We weren't told that. So we got back out over the fence with all the cameras and everything. Oh my God, we were running like crazy. So then we had to go to the owner of the field and say, could you take the black Angus bull out of the field? He said, oh my God. He said, I'm sorry, lady. He said, I forgot to do it. Sure, she's a friendly looking bull. Well, the bull looked as though he could have gorged all of us together. So he led the bull out. And the bull was put into the other field, and he was banging at the fence. And we did all of the filming while the bull was trying to get loose into us to gorge us.
Oh,
but
no.
What happened with that tree? And Easthana, who was the prophet, now I'll tell you, this will make you think about something. On Easthana said that at the time of now, there will be a visitation to that tree. And the prophecy is that the tree will dance to our words. And I was speaking under the tree while they were filming me under the tree. One of the other participants, Andrew St. Ledger, was jumping up and down in the other field. He said, oh my God, the tree is dancing. And the tree was actually doing a dance, and Jeff, our director, fabulous director, has it on film. I tell you, the hairs stood up in my arms. I mean, I just couldn't believe it. And I didn't believe it. And I said to Jeff, I don't believe that was happening. I saw it with my own eyes because he filmed it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, very special.
Yes. Well, it means that we're on track.
Yes.
All these signs means that they're there. You read those and they're on track. The Aboriginal people will tell you that too.
Yeah, neat. We're coming near the end. I wonder if you might want to share a little bit of, I mean, I know that this is developed in the film, but if you might want to share a little bit about your bio plan, and you've given some, recommendations as we've been going along, but maybe some specific advice and recommendations for the folks who have been with us this evening related to your bio plan.
Well, the idea of the bio plan is to plant about one tree per person for the next 6 years. And that gives you in the region of 50 billion trees going in. About 50 billion trees going back into the forest. These trees would be the epicenter trees for you forests. Then you protect the forests you have. And what that will do, it will pull back the carbon dioxide that is layered into the atmosphere, that is causing climate change, back into the 300s. That's all we need to do. And look after those 6 trees that we plant. Then what I had done is I drew up an app, and I drew the app up on wallpaper, and I sent the roll of wallpaper to the IT people, and they were delighted with it. And from that, you have an app. But under that app, I also wrote a book of explanations. So it's keyed into geopositioning across the whole continent. So whatever position you're in, I've given you 4 trees. And in some instances, some of the trees are rare. So what I'm trying to do is not lose them by way of biodiversity. And that's why you look at some trees, you think, oh my goodness, why is she talking about this tree? It's because I don't want biodiversity to go away. And I'm hoping that some people will in your areas plant some of those trees. For the main ones, they are trees that have the greatest weight per pound of wood. And the greatest weight per pound of wood is the ability to sequester carbon that goes into sugars, that it goes into the actual breast and bones of the tree itself. And by way of doing that, they're the most rapidly growing, they're most rapidly metabolizing, and the trees that are the nut trees require an extra special protection. They produce a huge amount, they require a huge amount of carbon dioxide to produce the nut. Then why I'm talking about the oak trees, just in case the temperatures get so hot, which they might do, they get so hot that you can't even plant any trees because we're in that window of opportunity right now. The idea is in the oak trees, they have quercetin and quercitrin in the bark of the trees and in the leaves and the boughs and the whole part of the trees. That is like wearing a pair of sunglasses if the ultraviolet radiation gets too high. The alpha, the beta, and the gamma radiation, which comes from the recycling of the greenhouse effect. If that gets too high, it means that we're all getting melanoma. It means your animals are getting melanoma. It means that you basically have to live almost underground in the shade during the summertime. I don't want that to happen. So that's why there are so many oaks going in, and the oaks is always a very good canopy tree for the registration of other species underneath the underlayer. So it was to try to put together the simplest solution for a very complex problem. And what I would like to do, there's 20 or so videos together with the app. So each one of those videos shows you how to plant the tree, how to look after it, and all of those things. I do understand it's like taking brain surgery and taking a file and kind of going into the head. It is the best I can do. It is the best we can do right now. And over and above that, I want to clone all of the global forest. I want to keep it at -40 and to maintain biodiversity in that cloned forest. A whole global forest, the whole global forest can fit in the size of your kitchen table. It is 1 cell thick, 2 cells thick. It will fit in the kitchen table, kept at -40, can be the greatest heritage for the United States of today.
Wow. Wow. What a neat initiative. That's wonderful. And then before I have Steffi come back and say a little bit about our next film on Saturday, or our next discussion on Saturday, just a little bit about where folks might find your books if they're interested. I know you talked about not using box stores, and I've got a couple of local bookstores here, but I wondered if there's a particular site or source where you encourage people to access your books as well.
Well, go to independent stores, go into the independent stores, because those kids, or those people are keeping the stores open and they're not making much money. So go in and order them there. Yep. Then the next thing, you try to give my books as a present to somebody for their birthdays. Your mother, your father, the whole bloody lot of the family, try and get the books out because it gets the idea out. It's not because you're buying the book. go to the libraries. If you don't have money, go to the blinking library, get the book out and read it, will you please? Then it's the idea. You can't kill an idea. Once an idea is born, you can't shoot it. If there is an idea that we can ourselves do something about climate change, then it is in our hands. It is too important for politicians. It is too important for politicians. Say it again. It is you and it is me. We cause the problem. Your parents, your grandparents cause the problem. We will fix this. So you go to the independent stores, and if that all fails, then go to Amazon or go to some one of the other stores, because I want you to read the book. I want you to give it as a present, because I want you to be my ambassador. I am David, and there is the Goliath out there. And I don't even have to talk about Goliath today, because you know what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
So it's
Yes, we
David
do.
and Goliath. I am just one little Irish woman who got bashed around as a child. And from that is why I've written To Speak for the Trees. I do not want any of you to be in the situation I was in as a child. I want you all to be successful, and I want you all to have a happy life. That is the best we can have. That is the best we can expect out of life. So go off and enjoy it, but buy the blinking book. And don't forget Ben Ralston's too. Buy his also.
Super. Well, that's a great note to end on, Diana. Thank you. And for those of you who don't have independent booksellers near you, I encourage you to check out Honest Dog Books or Apostle Island Booksellers, both in Bayfield here on the near us at Northland. Both independent booksellers who will certainly be able to set you up with Diana's books if you're interested. So thank you so much, Diana. Steffi's going to say a couple of words about Saturday evening's presentation, and thank you all for joining us this evening and for your questions.
Thank you, and good night.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for joining us again. This was lovely. Sorry for the small confusion with the films, but Diana's film, Call of the Forest, is still available to watch. It's in the links were provided in the first confirmation email that everyone got, but we put them in the chat also, and we'll make sure that those links are available so you can still watch the film after the discussion. And coming up on Saturday, at just this Saturday, 2 days from now, on March 5th at 7 p.m. Central Time, we will be doing our second evening of panel discussions with the two short films, Oshkogan Spirit of Fire and Into the Black, which will both explore the indigenous use of fire on landscape, and also how prescribed fires are being used across the United States to help bring biodiversity back to forests and their natural habitats. So that will be, we have two excellent panelists, Lane Johnson and Dylan Jennings will be here with us. So please, you can watch those films ahead of time. We'll make sure the links are available. They are free to watch on YouTube. We will post about them, and then we will, join us at 7 p.m. on Saturday for our discussion. We really look forward to it. And again, thank you all. Last note is that this panel discussion will be available on the Listening Point Foundation website shortly, probably in a few days or about a week, but we'll make sure it's up there and we'll let folks know, so it'll be free to view. So thank you all again, and have a wonderful evening. And Diana, if you just want to stay on for just a moment, we'll let folks log off. Thank you all and have a good night.